Okay, so I've gotten through part 3, the torso, and part 4, arms and hands. Starting from page 183, we begin to see the history of Christian racism. Pages and pages of it. I highly recommend that you listen to the Haywood Banks song, That Sweet Norwegian Jesus We All Know, as you read this section. We learn in chapter 10, Inside Out, how the original job of a seer was to interpret sheep's guts when animals for sacrifice were disemboweled. You see, it was the age-old ability of the gods to read the hearts of their worshippers. My powers are beyond your mortal imagination. I can see through your armor. We learn on page 200 that the Urim and Thummim were simply a pair of dice used to determine the will of God. Sounds like Joseph Smith. We learn of the real sin in the Garden of Eden. Seeking wisdom and immortality, which no mortal should want because those are the powers of the gods. We learn about why the priest class was invented. And Dr. Stavakopoulos gives her take on the sin of Cain. With all this talk of the true purpose of priests, I started to wonder if the priests of those days were fat. We learn about doo-doo, and more of what a doo-doo the Old Testament's God is. A particularly amusing chapter was where people wondered about the toilet habits not only of Moses, but of Christ himself. Almost worth buying the book just for that discussion. For a Mormon, this title page instantly brings up words from the temple endowment. I bless your arms and hands. Yes, a whole entire chapter on how right-handed is better than left-handed. We learn about what even more doo-doo King Hezekiah was. In the chapter about divine touch, we find out how God took over the title of Potter from female goddesses. In the chapter about holy handbooks, we found out something that sounds a little bit like what King Mosiah had to deal with in the Book of Mormon. So many books. So they pretty much had to shut that down because it worked before and then it got out of their control. If you've read the Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd, that's even touched on a bit here. I know, it's drier and a little less spicy than earlier chapters, but I still found it an interesting read. And very helpful as I deconstruct the Mormon God I was raised with, who had a body of flesh and bone, whose son had a body of flesh and bone. Unlike most Christians, Mormons do not ascribe to the Nicene Creed. So I've never understood Trinity or all-in-one, 3-in-1, 1-in-3 stuff. It also helps to see how this was all built in layers on top of each other, and Joseph basically turned it into his own alphabet soup.